Mike glanced across the living room where his wife, Jenna, was curled up on the couch, her phone glowing in the dim light. She was smiling, her fingers tapping quickly across the screen. For a moment, Mike felt a pang of unease. It wasn't unusual for Jenna to scroll through social media after dinner. She often chatted with friends or browsed photography groups for inspiration, but tonight, her focus seemed particularly intense. "What's got you so distracted?" Mike asked casually, setting his coffee mug on the table. Jenna looked up, startled, then laughed lightly. "Oh, nothing. Just talking to one of the girls from the photography group. She's giving me tips on lighting." Mike nodded, though the unease lingered. Jenna had always been passionate about photography, and her online communities were a big part of that world. But there was something about her smile, almost shy, almost private, that made him wonder. Over the next few weeks, Mike noticed subtle changes in Jenna's behavior. She was spending more time on her phone, laughing at messages she didn't share, and often excused herself to take calls in another room. When Mike asked about it, she brushed it off as group discussions or client inquiries for her budding photography business. One night, as they were lying in bed, Jenna's phone buzzed with a message. She turned the screen away from Mike and quickly typed a response, her face illuminated by the soft glow. "Late-night photography tips?" Mike joked, though his tone was tinged with curiosity. Jenna chuckled nervously. "Something like that." Mike didn't press further, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The tipping point came during a Saturday afternoon. Mike had just finished mowing the lawn and stepped inside to find Jenna on a video call. She ended the call abruptly when she saw him, her face flushed. "Who was that?" Mike asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Oh, just Sarah from the group," Jenna said quickly. "She was showing me some editing techniques." Mike nodded, but his suspicions grew. Something about Jenna's demeanor didn't sit right with him. Why was she so quick to end the call? And why hadn't she introduced him to this Sarah, if they were talking so often? That evening, Mike decided to dig a little deeper. While Jenna was in the shower, he opened her laptop, which she often left on the kitchen counter. Her social media account was already logged in. Mike hesitated, guilt gnawing at him, but curiosity won out. He scrolled through her messages until he found a chat thread labeled "Sarah Photography Tips." But as he opened the conversation, his stomach sank. The messages were not from a woman named Sarah. The profile picture showed a man in his mid-30s with a confident smile and piercing blue eyes. His name was Alex. Mike scanned the messages, his hands trembling. The exchanges started innocently enough, discussions about photography, camera settings, and composition techniques. But as he scrolled further, the tone shifted. The messages became more personal, filled with inside jokes and compliments. "Alex, you're so talented, Jenna. I bet your husband doesn't tell you that enough. Jenna, he tries, but, you know how it is. Sometimes it's nice to hear it from someone else. Alex, well, you deserve to hear it every day. You're amazing." Mike's heart pounded. He closed the laptop quickly, his mind racing. Who was Alex? And how long had Jenna been talking to him? The next day, Mike couldn't focus on anything. Jenna went about her routine as if nothing was wrong, but Mike's thoughts were consumed by the messages. He debated confronting her but decided to gather more information first. If there was more to this, he needed to know. That night, after Jenna had fallen asleep, Mike checked her phone. The conversation with Alex continued, and the messages were even more intimate than before. "Alex, I can't stop thinking about you. Jenna, I shouldn't say this, but I think about you, too." Mike's breath caught. It wasn't just harmless flirting, this was something deeper. The messages hinted at a plan to meet in person, though no specific details were mentioned. The following morning, Mike decided to confront Jenna. He waited until Lily, their 8-year-old daughter, was at school. Jenna was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, when Mike set her phone down in front of her. "Who's Alex?" he asked, his voice steady but cold. Jenna's face paled. She opened her mouth to respond but seemed unable to find the words. "Don't lie to me," Mike continued. "I've seen the messages." Jenna's eyes filled with tears. "Mike, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," he interrupted, his voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been carrying on an emotional affair with some guy from the internet." Jenna wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. "It started as a friendship. I swear, Mike. We connected over photography, and I don't know. It just got out of hand." "Out of hand?" Mike repeated bitterly. "You're planning to meet him, Jenna. How is that just a friendship?" She shook her head. "I haven't met him. I wasn't going to." "Don't," Mike said, cutting her off. "Don't make excuses. Just tell me the truth." Jenna's silence was answer enough. Jenna sat across from Mike, her hands clasped tightly on the table, her face streaked with tears. The weight of her silence pressed heavily in the room. Mike's anger simmered beneath the surface, his heart aching with equal parts betrayal and confusion. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice cold and steady. Jenna hesitated, then said softly, "A few months." Mike's stomach turned. "Months? You've been lying to me for months." "I wasn't lying," Jenna protested weakly. "At first, it was just about photography. I didn't think it would. I didn't think it would turn into this." "But it did," Mike snapped, his voice sharp. "It turned into messages about how you think about him, plans to meet up. How is that not lying to me? How is that not a betrayal?" Jenna flinched as though he had struck her. "I know it was wrong, Mike. I know I've hurt you. But I swear, I never meant for it to go this far." Mike laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Do you even hear yourself? You didn't mean for it to go this far. What does that even mean, Jenna? What exactly were you planning with Alex?" She looked down at her hands, her silence answering the question more loudly than any words could. Over the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. Jenna made several attempts to talk to Mike, but he shut her down each time. He couldn't bring himself to have a calm conversation, not when the image of Alex's messages haunted him every time he closed his eyes. Lily, sensing the unease, asked him one evening, "Daddy, are you and Mommy mad at each other?" Mike forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. Mommy and I are just having a grown-up disagreement." "Are you gonna stop being friends?" Lily asked, her innocent question hitting him like a hammer. "No," Mike said quickly, pulling her into a hug. "We're still a team. Don't you worry about that." But even as he said the words, he wondered if they were true. That weekend, Jenna left her phone unattended while she went to take a nap. Mike sat in the living room, staring at it, debating whether to look. He hated the idea of snooping, but the thought of not knowing what she was still hiding ate away at him. He picked up the phone, unlocked it, and opened her messages with Alex. The tone of the conversation had changed. Alex's latest messages were short, almost curt. "Alex, I can't keep doing this if you're not serious about meeting. Jenna, I told you, it's complicated. I need more time. Alex, you said that weeks ago. Are you ever going to tell him?" Mike's blood ran cold. "Tell me what?" He scrolled back through the thread, looking for context. Then he found it. "Jenna, I don't know how to tell him about us, Alex. I'm afraid it'll destroy him. Alex, he deserves to know the truth. You can't keep lying to him forever." Mike sat back, his hands trembling. What truth? What was Jenna keeping from him that Alex seemed so insistent on revealing? That evening, after Lily was in bed, Mike confronted Jenna again. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when he stood in front of her, blocking her view. "What haven't you told me?" he demanded. Jenna blinked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," Mike said, his voice low and dangerous. "Alex told you to stop lying to me." "What truth am I missing, Jenna?" Her face drained of color. She set her phone down, her hands trembling. "Mike, please. I don't want to do this right now." "That's too bad," Mike said. "Because I'm not going to stop asking until I get an answer." "What haven't you told me?" Jenna buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mike waited, his patience thinning with every second of silence. Finally, she looked up at him, her face pale and tear-streaked. "I met him once," she whispered. Mike's heart sank. "What?" "Just once," she said quickly. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I met him in person a few weeks ago." The air seemed to leave the room. Mike stumbled back a step, his chest tight. "You met him? And you didn't think to tell me?" "I was scared," Jenna said, her voice breaking. "I knew how bad it looked, but nothing happened, Mike. We just talked." "Just talked," Mike repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth," Jenna insisted. "I know I've already broken your trust, but I'm not lying about this. We met at a cafe, we talked about photography and us. He wanted more, but I told him it couldn't happen. I ended it, Mike." Mike shook his head, his mind reeling. "If you ended it, why is he still messaging you? Why is he asking you to tell me the truth?" Jenna didn't answer. Her silence was deafening. Mike spent that night on the couch, staring at the ceiling as his thoughts raced. The woman he thought he knew had been keeping secrets, one after another, and he had no way of knowing if the truth was still out there, lurking beneath more lies. He had a decision to make. Confront Alex directly, or dig deeper on his own. One way or another, he was going to find out the truth. Mike sat alone in the house, Jenna's frantic messages and missed calls piling up on his phone. He couldn't bring himself to respond, let alone face her. The image of her and Alex laughing together, sharing what seemed like an intimate moment, replayed in his mind, fueling the fire of his anger. For years, Mike had prided himself on being a loyal husband, a supportive partner. He had sacrificed time and energy to build a stable life for their family. And now, it felt like all of that had been for nothing. Hours later, the sound of the front door creaking open broke the silence. Jenna stepped inside, her face pale and tear-streaked. She hesitated in the doorway, clutching her bag tightly. "Mike," she said softly, her voice cracking. "Can we talk?" Mike didn't look at her. "Why?" "So you can lie to me again." "I'm not lying," she said, her tone desperate. "I know I messed up, but I need you to hear me out." He turned to her, his expression cold. "I've seen enough, Jenna. You don't get to explain this away." Jenna stepped closer, her hands trembling. "It wasn't what it looked like. I swear, Mike. I never meant for it to go this far." Mike laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and hollow. "What exactly did you mean, then?" "Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were pretty happy with him." Tears streamed down her face. "I wasn't happy, Mike. I was confused. Lonely. We've been so distant lately, and Alex, he made me feel seen." Mike's fists clenched at his sides. "And I didn't. You couldn't talk to me, your husband, the father of your child. You had to run to some stranger from the internet." "It wasn't like that," Jenna protested. "I wasn't trying to replace you. I needed someone to talk to." "Talking?" Mike said, his voice rising. "Is that what you call planning secret meetups?" Laughing with him while you lied to me? That's not talking, Jenna. That's betrayal. Jenna collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I don't know how to fix this, she sobbed. I've ruined everything. Mike stood over her, his chest heaving. You're damn right you have. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Jenna's confession hung heavy in the air, suffocating any hope of resolution. Mike finally broke the silence. Did you sleep with him? He asked bluntly. Jenna's head shot up, her eyes wide with shock. No. Mike, I swear, it never got physical. Then why meet him at all? Mike demanded. Why put yourself in a situation where it could have? I wasn't thinking, she whispered. I was selfish, and I let my emotions get the better of me. But I swear, I never crossed that line. Mike's anger softened, but only slightly. Even if that's true, you still broke my trust, Jenna. And I don't know if we can come back from this. For the next few days, Mike avoided Jenna as much as possible. He threw himself into work and spent extra time with Lily, who seemed blissfully unaware of the tension between her parents. But every moment away from Jenna was a reminder of the fracture in their marriage. One evening, Mike received an unexpected call from Eric, his best friend. Hey, man, Eric said, his tone cautious. I heard from Jenna. She's worried about you. Mike sighed, leaning back in his chair. She should be. She lied to me, Eric. She's been talking to some guy online, meeting him behind my back. Damn, Eric said after a pause. That's rough. Have you figured out what you're gonna do? Mike shook his head, though Eric couldn't see him. I don't know. Part of me wants to walk away, but then there's Lily. I can't just throw away our family. Eric hesitated, then said, Look, I'm not saying you should forgive her, but maybe you should hear her out. If she's serious about fixing things, you owe it to yourself, and Lily, to at least consider it. Mike frowned, Eric's words hitting a nerve. Was he being too stubborn? Or was he protecting himself from further heartbreak? That night, Mike finally agreed to sit down with Jenna. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence between them heavy and uncomfortable. I don't even know where to start, Jenna admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. How about with the truth? Mike said. All of it. Jenna nodded, wiping her eyes. Alex and I met in a photography group a few months ago. At first, it was just casual conversation, about cameras, editing techniques, things like that. But then we started talking more, and it got personal. Personal how? Mike asked, his voice hard. We talked about our lives, our struggles, she said. He told me about his divorce, and I told him about us. Mike's jaw tightened. You told him about our marriage? Jenna looked down, ashamed. Yes. I shouldn't have, but I felt like I couldn't talk to you. You've been so busy with work, and I didn't want to burden you. So instead, you turned to someone else, Mike said bitterly. Do you even realize how that makes me feel? I do now, she said, her voice breaking. And I hate myself for it. I never should have let it get this far. Mike leaned back in his chair, studying her. Why did you meet him at the cafe? What were you planning to do? I don't know, she admitted. I just wanted to see him in person, to put a face to the conversations. I wasn't planning to do anything else. Mike shook his head, his frustration mounting. Do you hear yourself, Jenna? You were willing to risk everything, our marriage, our family, for a conversation. I know, she said, tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake, Mike. A terrible mistake. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Mike stared at her, his emotions a tangled mess. Part of him wanted to believe her, to give her a chance to fix what she had broken. But another part of him wondered if things could ever truly go back to the way they were. I need time, he said finally. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jenna. But I'm willing to think about it. Jenna nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Thank you, Mike. That's all I'm asking for. The uneasy truce between Mike and Jenna began with a simple agreement: they would try to rebuild, but only if Jenna was completely transparent moving forward. For Mike, the idea of salvaging their marriage felt both necessary and impossible. Necessary for Lily's sake, but impossible because the wound was still fresh, and trust, once broken, was hard to restore. Jenna, for her part, threw herself into repairing the damage. She deleted all contact with Alex, blocking him on social media, deleting his messages, and even leaving the photography group where they'd first met. She offered Mike access to her phone and email, an olive branch she hoped would begin to rebuild the trust she had shattered. But for Mike, the scars ran deep. Each time her phone buzzed, he tensed. Each time she excused herself to make a call, his mind spiraled. Was she really trying to fix things, or was she simply covering her tracks better than before? One day, while Jenna was out running errands, Mike received a text from an unknown number. Mike, it's Alex. I just wanted to apologize for everything. Can we talk? Mike's heart pounded as he stared at the message. The audacity of Alex to contact him directly was infuriating, but a part of him was curious. What did Alex want to say? Did he know something Jenna hadn't told him? After a long moment, Mike typed a response. Talk about what? Haven't you done enough damage already? Alex replied almost immediately. You deserve the truth. There's more to this than Jenna's told you. Mike's stomach churned. He debated ignoring the message, but curiosity won out. What truth? Alex sent a long response, the words making Mike's blood run cold. She didn't just talk to me. She said things about your marriage that I doubt she's told you. She even mentioned leaving you at one point. I didn't want to be the cause of that, but she kept coming back to me. You should know what you're dealing with. When Jenna returned home, Mike was waiting for her in the living room. His expression was stone cold, and the phone rested in his hand like evidence in a courtroom. What's wrong? Jenna asked cautiously, setting her purse on the counter. Why don't you tell me? Mike said, holding up his phone. Alex texted me. Jenna's face drained of color. What? How? Why would he do that? You tell me, Mike said sharply. Because according to him, there's more to this story. He says you were talking about leaving me. Jenna's hands trembled as she took a step closer. Mike, I never meant it. I was upset, and I said things I didn't mean. You have to believe me. Do I? Mike snapped, his voice rising. Because every time I think I've got the full picture, there's another twist. What else haven't you told me, Jenna? What else is waiting to blindside me? Nothing. Jenna cried, tears streaming down her face. I've told you everything. I was stupid, and I said things I shouldn't have. But I never planned to leave you. You're my husband, and I love you. Mike shook his head, pacing the room. Love? You call this love? Sneaking around, telling some other guy our problems, talking about leaving me? That's not love, Jenna. That's betrayal. I know, she whispered, her voice trembling. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please, Mike, don't let him ruin us. He's lying because he wants to hurt you. Maybe, Mike said bitterly. Or maybe he's just telling me what I need to hear because you didn't. The tension between them was palpable for days. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that Jenna wasn't being entirely honest, despite her assurances. He decided to dig deeper, not because he wanted to catch her in another lie, but because he needed clarity. One evening, while Jenna was asleep, Mike retrieved her laptop and went through her emails. Most of the messages were work-related or from photography groups, but one caught his eye, a folder labeled Archive. Inside, he found older messages with Alex that Jenna hadn't deleted. The messages confirmed what Alex had claimed. In one exchange, Jenna had vented about feeling unappreciated in her marriage, saying things like, "Sometimes I wonder if I'd be happier on my own," and, "Mike's so distant lately, it's like we're just roommates." Mike stared at the screen, his heart heavy. The messages were from months ago, long before he had discovered the affair, but the betrayal still stung. She had confided in Alex about their marriage in ways she hadn't with him, and that knowledge cut deeper than he expected. The next morning, Mike confronted Jenna with the emails. She looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, shaking her head. "Mike, those were from months ago," she said, her voice trembling. "I was in a dark place, and I said things I didn't mean. I was venting. Please, you have to understand." "Understand?" Mike said bitterly. "How am I supposed to understand when you couldn't even talk to me? You talked to him about our marriage, Jenna. You talked about leaving me. How do I just move past that?" "I don't know," Jenna admitted, her tears falling freely. "But I'll do anything to fix this. Please, Mike, give me a chance to prove that I've changed." Mike sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You keep saying that, Jenna. But every time I turn around, there's something else. I don't know if I can keep doing this." That evening, Mike sat alone on the back porch, staring out at the darkened yard. The weight of the decision he had to make pressed heavily on his shoulders. Could he really forgive Jenna? Could he move past the lies, the betrayal, and the pain? Eric's words echoed in his mind, "It's about figuring out what you can live with." Mike closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear, the road ahead would be anything but easy. The days following Mike's discovery of Jenna's archived messages felt like a blur. Though they lived under the same roof, the space between them felt like miles. Conversations were brief and strained, their once comfortable rhythm replaced by an unbearable tension. Jenna did her best to keep things together, throwing herself into housework, helping Lily with homework, and attending her solo therapy sessions. But her efforts felt hollow to Mike. He saw her trying, but the weight of her betrayal loomed too large to be easily dismissed. One night, as Mike sat in the guest room scrolling through his phone, he noticed a text from Eric. "Eric, how are things holding up?" "Mike, not great. Feels like I'm just going through the motions." "Eric, that's rough, man. Have you decided what you're going to do?" "Mike, not yet. Every time I think about forgiving her, I remember the messages, and it all comes rushing back." "Eric, maybe it's time to focus on what you need. Not what Jenna wants, not what's best for appearances. Just, what will bring you peace." Mike stared at Eric's message for a long moment. What would bring him peace? Could he truly find it by staying with Jenna and rebuilding what they had, or would walking away finally allow him to breathe? The next day, Mike decided to take a personal day off work. He dropped Lily off at school, then drove aimlessly, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few weeks. His mind wandered to the early days of his relationship with Jenna, how they had met at a mutual friend's party, their whirlwind romance, the joy of welcoming Lily into their lives. Had it all been an illusion? Or had they simply lost sight of each other along the way? Mike parked his car near a quiet park and sat on a bench, watching the world move around him. A couple jogged by, laughing as they shared earbuds. A family played on the swings, their children squealing with delight. The sight of them stirred something in Mike, a longing for simpler times when his own family had been whole and happy. But was that happiness real? Or had it always been fragile, waiting to shatter? Later that afternoon, Mike returned home to find Jenna in the kitchen. She looked up as he entered, her expression wary but hopeful. "Hey," she said softly. "How was your day?" "Fine," Mike replied flatly, setting his keys on the counter. He hesitated, then added, "We need to talk." Jenna's face paled, but she nodded. Okay. They sat across from each other at the dining table, the air thick with unspoken words. Mike took a deep breath, steadying himself. I've been thinking a lot about everything. Jenna's hands fidgeted in her lap. And I still don't know if I can move past this, he admitted. Every time I think about forgiving you, I wonder if I'll ever be able to trust you again. And without trust, what's left? Jenna's voice trembled as she spoke. I know I've broken your trust, Mike. And I know it's not something I can fix overnight. But I love you. I love our family. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I'm committed to you. Mike stared at her, his emotions a swirling mess of anger, pain, and something he couldn't quite name. What if it's not enough? What if no matter how hard you try, it's not enough to erase what you did? Jenna's tears spilled over, but she didn't look away. Then I'll keep trying. Because you're worth it. That evening, Jenna suggested they attend a couples therapy session together, something she had been pushing for since her solo sessions began. Mike reluctantly agreed, knowing that if they were going to salvage their marriage, they couldn't do it alone. Their first session together was uncomfortable, to say the least. The therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Warren, asked them to lay everything on the table. Why don't we start with you, Mike? Dr. Warren said. How are you feeling about everything that's happened? Mike hesitated, then said, angry. Betrayed. Like everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. Dr. Warren nodded. Those are valid feelings. And Jenna, how are you processing Mike's emotions? Jenna wiped her eyes and said, I hate myself for what I did. I see how much I've hurt him, and I'd give anything to take it back. But I can't, so all I can do is try to show him that I'm committed to earning his trust again. Dr. Warren leaned forward. What are you doing to earn that trust? I've cut off all contact with Alex, Jenna said. I deleted everything, our messages, my social media, even the photography group where we met. I've given Mike full access to my phone and email. And I'm attending therapy to figure out why I let things get this far. And Mike, do you believe her efforts are sincere? Dr. Warren asked. Mike hesitated. I want to believe her. But it's hard. Every time I think about moving forward, I get stuck on what she did. It's like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dr. Warren nodded thoughtfully. It's natural to feel that way after a betrayal. But if you're both committed to rebuilding your relationship, it will take time, effort, and patience, from both of you. As they left the session, Jenna reached for Mike's hand. He hesitated but didn't pull away. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and gratitude. Thank you for coming, she said softly. Mike nodded, though his emotions remained conflicted. It's a start. But it doesn't mean everything's okay. I know, Jenna said. But I'm willing to fight for us, even if it takes the rest of my life. That night, as Mike lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling, wondering if they could ever truly rebuild what they had lost. The road ahead felt daunting, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The days following their first couples therapy session were a cautious dance between progress and tension. Jenna continued her efforts to prove her commitment. She scheduled more therapy sessions, cooked Mike's favorite meals, and made a conscious effort to keep her phone in plain sight, its one secretive glow now an open invitation for scrutiny. Mike appreciated her efforts, but his heart remained guarded. Forgiveness wasn't a switch he could flip. He replayed the messages, the lies, and the cafe confrontation in his mind, each memory a sharp reminder of her betrayal. But alongside the pain, there were moments, fleeting, fragile moments, when he glimpsed the woman he had fallen in love with years ago. Those glimpses were enough to keep him trying, though doubt continued to gnaw at him. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, Mike and Jenna sat together in the living room. The television was on, but neither of them was paying attention. Jenna turned to Mike, her expression tentative. "Mike," she began, "I've been thinking about what Dr. Warren said in our session. About rebuilding trust." Mike nodded silently, waiting for her to continue. "I know actions speak louder than words," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I also know that I haven't told you everything. And if we're going to move forward, I need to be completely honest." Mike's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Jenna looked down at her hands, wringing them nervously. "There were things I didn't say during our sessions. Things I was too scared to admit. But you deserve to know everything." Mike's pulse quickened. "Then tell me." She took a deep breath. "When I first started talking to Alex, it wasn't just about photography. I was venting. About us. About how I felt disconnected, unimportant. And at first, he was just a good listener. But over time, I started looking forward to our conversations in a way I shouldn't have." Mike's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. "It never got physical," Jenna continued. "I swear, Mike. But emotionally, I crossed a line. I said things to him that I should have been saying to you. And when he suggested meeting in person, I agreed because I don't know. I guess I wanted to feel that connection in real life. To feel seen." Her voice cracked, and tears filled her eyes. "But when I saw you walk into that cafe, it hit me. I realized what I was doing and how much I was risking. And in that moment, I knew I didn't want Alex. I wanted you. I just didn't know how to fix what I'd already broken." Mike leaned back, his mind racing. Her words stung, but they also carried a painful truth, one he couldn't ignore. He had been distant, absorbed in work and responsibilities, assuming their marriage could withstand the strain without effort. It didn't excuse her betrayal, but it gave him a clearer picture of how they had arrived at this point. "Why are you telling me this now?" Mike asked, his voice quieter than before. "Because I don't want there to be any more secrets between us," Jenna said. "If we're going to move forward, you need to know everything. Even the parts that make me look worse." Mike studied her, searching for any sign of manipulation. But all he saw was vulnerability and regret. "I appreciate your honesty," he said finally. "But that doesn't mean this is fixed. It doesn't erase what you did." "I know," Jenna said, her tears falling freely. "But it's a start. And I'll keep proving to you that I'm all in, no matter how long it takes." The following week, they attended another couples therapy session. Dr. Warren praised Jenna's decision to share the full truth, noting that honesty, while painful, was a crucial step in rebuilding trust. "Mike," Dr. Warren said, "how did Jenna's confession make you feel?" Mike hesitated. "It hurt. A lot. But, it also felt like progress. At least now, I know there's nothing else hiding in the shadows." "And do you feel that Jenna's actions since the affair was revealed are helping to rebuild trust?" Dr. Warren asked. Mike nodded slowly. "She's trying. And I see that. But I'm still scared. Scared that if I let my guard down, I'll get blindsided again." "That fear is normal," Dr. Warren said gently. "Rebuilding trust takes time and consistent effort. But the fact that you're still here, still trying, shows that you haven't given up." That evening, as Mike and Jenna sat on the back porch, watching the sunset, Jenna reached for his hand. This time, Mike didn't hesitate. He allowed her fingers to intertwine with his, the simple gesture feeling like a small step forward. "Thank you for not giving up on us," Jenna said softly. Mike glanced at her, his expression guarded but not unkind. "I'm not there yet. But I'm trying." Jenna nodded, her grip on his hand tightening slightly. "That's all I can ask for." In the weeks that followed, their relationship began to shift. The changes were subtle at first, small moments of shared laughter, honest conversations about their fears and hopes. They started spending more time together as a family, taking Lily to the park or playing board games at home. Mike still had his doubts, and there were days when the pain of Jenna's betrayal felt overwhelming. But those moments were slowly outweighed by the glimmers of hope and connection they were rebuilding piece by piece. One evening, as they were putting Lily to bed, she looked up at them and said, "You guys are smiling more. Does that mean you're happy again?" Jenna's eyes filled with tears, and Mike felt a lump form in his throat. He knelt beside Lily's bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're working on it, sweetheart. And no matter what, we'll always love you." Lily smiled and hugged them both tightly, her small arms a reminder of what they stood to lose if they didn't keep trying. As Mike and Jenna stood in the hallway, watching their daughter sleep, Mike turned to Jenna and said, "I'm not ready to say I've forgiven you. But I'm willing to keep trying. For us. For her." Jenna nodded, her tears falling silently. "Thank you, Mike. I won't let you down again." For the first time in months, Mike felt a flicker of something he hadn't dared to hope for, peace. Months passed, and Mike and Jenna's relationship began to evolve in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The pain of the betrayal still lingered, but they had learned to confront it together, one therapy session and difficult conversation at a time. What had once seemed irreparable now felt like something they could rebuild, slowly, carefully, and with deliberate effort. One day, as they were cleaning out the garage, Mike found an old photo album buried under a pile of forgotten boxes. He dusted it off and flipped through the pages, his heart aching at the memories within. Pictures from their early days of dating, their wedding, and the first moments with Lily filled the album, each photo a reminder of the life they had built together. Jenna came over, her hands smudged with dirt from sorting boxes. "What's that?" she asked, wiping her hands on her jeans. "An old photo album," Mike said, handing it to her. "I forgot we even had this." Jenna opened the album, her breath catching as she saw the pictures. "I remember that day," she said, pointing to a photo of them at the beach, both laughing as the tide rolled in. "We spent hours trying to build that sandcastle, and it still collapsed." Mike chuckled despite himself. "Yeah. But it was fun while it lasted." Jenna looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "I want that back, Mike. Not just the memories, but the way we were back then. Happy. Connected." Mike sighed, his fingers brushing the edge of the album. "I want that too. But it's going to take time." Jenna nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." Their next therapy session marked a turning point. Dr. Warren introduced a trust-building exercise where they wrote letters to each other, detailing their feelings about the past and their hopes for the future. The process was emotional and raw, but it forced them to confront their pain and articulate what they needed from each other moving forward. When it was Mike's turn to read his letter, he hesitated. The words felt heavy, but he knew they had to be spoken. "Jenna," he began, "when I found out about Alex, I felt like my world was falling apart. I couldn't understand how the woman I loved, the mother of my child, could betray me like that. It broke something in me, something I'm still trying to fix." Jenna wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. "But," Mike continued, "over these past few months, I've seen you try. I've seen you take responsibility for your actions and do everything you can to make things right. And while I don't know if I'll ever forget what happened, I'm starting to believe that forgiveness is possible." Jenna's breath hitched. "Thank you, Mike. That means more than you know." Dr. Warren smiled. "That's a powerful step forward. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing to move forward despite the pain." At home that evening, Jenna surprised Mike with a candle at dinner. She had cooked his favorite meal and set the table with their wedding china. Mike raised an eyebrow as he entered the dining room. "What's all this?" Jenna smiled shyly. "I wanted to do something special. To remind us of what we're working toward." Mike hesitated, then sat down. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in months. They laughed, reminisced, and even shared a few inside jokes. For the first time in a long time, Mike felt a sense of peace, a glimmer of the connection they had lost. After dinner, Jenna handed him an envelope. "What's this?" he asked, opening it. "It's a letter," she said softly. "One I wrote to you during my therapy sessions. I wasn't sure if I'd ever have the courage to give it to you, but I think you're ready to read it now." Mike unfolded the letter and began to read. Jenna's words were raw and heartfelt, detailing her regret, her love for him, and her unwavering commitment to their family. By the time he finished, his eyes were damp, and he looked up at her with a mixture of gratitude and lingering sadness. "Thank you," he said simply. Jenna reached across the table, taking his hand. "I'll never stop trying, Mike. You and Lily are everything to me." The following weekend, the family went on a trip to the beach, a deliberate choice to recreate the memories from the photo album. As Lily built sandcastles, Jenna and Mike sat side by side on a blanket, their feet buried in the sand. "Do you think this one will last longer?" Jenna asked, nodding toward Lily's precarious creation. "Probably not," Mike said with a small laugh. "But that's the fun part, building it again." Jenna glanced at him, her eyes searching his. "Is that how you feel about us?" Mike turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah. We've got a lot of rebuilding to do. But I think it's worth it." Jenna smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Me too." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Mike felt a weight lift from his chest. The pain of Jenna's betrayal would always be a part of their story, but it no longer defined them. They were choosing to move forward, not as the same people they once were, but as two individuals committed to building something new. And for the first time in a long time, Mike believed they could.